So I like mysteries. And one mystery that has me scratching my head constantly is why so many of our members of Congress in the United States they have prioritized Ukraine over everything, including our own country. So I started looking into this, and one thing that I find very interesting is the amount of American lawmakers that travel to Ukraine. Some of them have been going for over a decade consistently. One of them, Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut, is extremely vocal about how we have to send money to Ukraine or else it's the freaking end of the world, according to him. Now, this is interesting because he has been continuously traveling to Ukraine over the past 11 years. The first instance that I can find of him traveling to Ukraine is in December 2013, when he and then Senator John McCain from Arizona went over to tell protesters in Ukraine that Ukraine's future was with the West. Now, Ukraine is a country. It's not a state in the United States. So why would U.S. senators be going to a country to hang out with protesters who are protesting their government to tell them what their future is? Now, at the time, the president of Ukraine had just passed on a bad trade deal with the EU. He said it wasn't good for Ukraine, so he passed on it. Well, Russia had a trade deal that they wanted to sign with Ukraine, and the Ukrainian president said he would sign it because it was a better deal for Ukraine. So there were some protesters who were against that because they want to join the EU and be closer to the West. And then there were some protesters who they were out there to support the president at the time. And this happened in December 2013. And then the coup happened about a month later. So quite a coincidence there. And as you go along and you look for information for Ukraine, it's evident that Senator Chris Murphy is extremely prominent and pushing for more and more funding for this country. Now, a lot of people say, this war has been going on for 2 years. No, it hasn't. The war has been going on since 2014 when Russia invaded Crimea and the eastern provinces of Ukraine. This is important because a lot of people don't know that we were giving tons of money, millions and millions of dollars to Ukraine from 2014 on. Also, a lot of people may not be aware that in 2008 in Brussels, NATO told Ukraine and Georgia that they would like for them to be members of NATO. Now, why? Anyway, so that happened in 2008. And since that time, the United States has been working to align Ukraine's military forces with NATO forces. This has been like a thing. That's why there were Americans going over to train Ukrainian soldiers. So this is not like, oh my gosh, Putin, he just walked into Ukraine in 2022. That's not what happened. There were a lot of things that happened before there was an invasion and also after the 2014 invasion. There is reason to believe that the United States helped institute a coup of the duly elected president of Ukraine. Now, when you say that, some people are like, oh, that's crazy. But we know that the CIA did that all over Central and South America in the 1970s and 80s. So why would it be so difficult for people to believe that once again, we were taking down a government? This happens all the time. So after the coup, there is a phone call that was leaked to the media from Victoria Nuland. I'm sure you've probably heard her name associated with Ukraine. Well, she works for the State Department in the United States, but she was in Ukraine at the time of the coup. And after that, in this phone call, she appears to be discussing who's going to be the next president. Does that sound like a regular election setup? No, it does not. It sounds like someone is installing a puppet government. Which, has that happened anywhere? Yeah, it has. The United States has done this in several different places. So just because it was a little bit more covert in Ukraine, I don't know why people act like this is so unheard of. But as we look through the years, there have been chances at peace with Russia, but Ukraine has consistently passed on that. Why did they pass on it? Well, if you look at this chart, you can see that it seems like there was a buildup to the war. Like maybe this was planned. They were planning on a bigger escalation from Putin. And why would he escalate? Well, because they knew that he did not want Ukraine in NATO. Now, since this is common knowledge, everybody knows if they start talking about Ukraine's going to join NATO, there's going to be an invasion or an escalation of an invasion. Everybody knew that. But according to Angela Merkel, who was the Chancellor of Germany in 2015, she went along with the president of France to Minsk, Belarus, with a Ukrainian delegation, and they met with a Russian delegation, and they had peace talks. So the Minsk agreements, there were 2 sets of them, they were worked out but never implemented. Well, Zelensky ran on peace. He said he wanted to sign the Minsk agreements and put them into play so that Ukraine could have peace. So sounds good, right? Come to find out, there was never any plan to do that. Angela Merkel says that they just wanted to have that meeting so that they could build up Ukraine's military to prepare to go to war with Russia. Now, this is not me making it up. Zelensky even says he had no plans of signing those agreements. The question, I guess the only real question is, was Zelensky just a puppet in this where they're like controlling him? They have something over his head, or I don't know, but apparently that was never the plan. Peace was never the plan. War was always the plan. So as Americans, we really need to ask ourselves, what is going on? Why are we sending all this money? And since we've been sending money really since 2008, at least, what has it done in Ukraine? Because now elections are canceled for the second time. A few religions have been banned. An American journalist died in prison because there's no freedom of speech, and you can't criticize what Zelensky is doing in the war. And you can't say that Ukraine is not winning, even though they aren't. Even if you're in the military, you will be fired if you say that Ukraine is having a hard time. So, and also Zelensky has banned opposition parties, so I guess there's no reason to have an election. But when we talk about freedom and democracy and all these things, it doesn't sound like the values that Zelensky is displaying in Ukraine align with American values. So why is it such a desperate need for us to support them financially in a war that they are not going to win?